Welcome! Welcome to what? Welcome to the 18th episode of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. That's what. We've had one of our famous little breaks, but we're back strong with what I think is going to be remembered as one of our best episodes yet. In this one, me, Alan Walker, Alison Ettridge and Toby Culshaw co-hosted an episode where we spoke to Kim Bryan of AMS. First, we covered some meaty old topics happening in the world of talent intelligence, including some recommended listening. Yes, we like other podcasts, the growth or potential growth of the cybersecurity industry, and some talent intelligence tech news. And then, of course, we gave Kim a grilling, covering such areas as how her team at AMS has changed over the course of the 5 years that she's been with them, the kind of work they do and at what volume, tactical versus strategic, internal versus external consultants, and what's next with TI at AMS. Oh, and some more. Some really good stuff. So get listening, get learning, and stay intelligent, folks. Have fun! Before we get on with the main event, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast is proudly sponsored by our friends at Stratagens, and here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you a little bit more about them.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.
Hello, I'm Alan Walker, and welcome to episode 18 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast.
Yay!
After saying in the last episode that we were finally back to our regular monthly cadence, we've not recorded an episode for a couple of months, but, quality over quantity, I say. And over the coming few months, we'll be bringing you even more quality. Anyhow, I am joined on the show by my usual co-hosts, Alison Ettridge of Talent Intuition and Toby Culshaw of Amazon. How are we both?
Very good, thank you.
Very good.
Wonderful to hear. And as usual, we have with us a guest. So who is it this month? Who's going to tell us about how they're rocking the world of talent intelligence? It's Kim Bryan of AMS. Kim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all. For those of our listeners that don't know you, can you give us a quick intro about who you are and what it is you do, please?
Absolutely. So, Kim Bryan, I head up our global insights and intelligence function here at AMS. So it's a growing team that I look after of about 85 people globally who look after insights and intelligence for a lot of different clients across different industries. So that definitely keeps me on my toes. I've been doing that for 6 years now. And I guess my background is very much an odd mix of finance, numbers, and HR. So talent intelligence was definitely the right home for me.
Excellent, that's great. And thank you. It's brilliant to have you on the podcast. Me and my co-hosts, and of course our listeners, are really looking forward to hearing more about you and your work. And on that point of listeners, for any newbies out there, a quick reminder about the running order. In just a minute, Toby's going to guide us through a discussion on some of the recent thought-inducing hot topics from around the talent intelligence and people space. And then Alison will take the lead on firing some questions at Kim about TI and her world. And I'll put my feet up and gaze unadmiringly as these big brains talk about things that I barely understand before closing out the show. So let's do this thing. Toby, you're up first. What's happening?
Lots.
Good to hear. That's great. Alison, over to you.
On to Kim. No, there's been quite a lot going on. Usually at this point, we bang the drum about the fact it's a super hot recruitment market. Everything's going crazy. Obviously, the economic situation is a bit up in the air at the moment. And we'll get onto that in a minute around what's going on with tech. But the first thing I wanted to just highlight was a really good podcast I actually listened to by the team over at SCIP, so the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals Group. They do the SCIP IntelliCast, which I'd highly recommend. They were talking to Target's Robert Bunchek, apologies if I'm saying your name wrong, Robert, who's the VP of Enterprise Strategic Planning, Intel and Implementation. And they were talking around how strategy and intelligence work together at Target. Really, really interesting podcast. I thought it gave some really interesting views on how TI could potentially mature in the future, particularly where he was talking around kind of a centralized Intel hub that gave kind of the scaled Intel, the programmatic support, the anything that you need to kind of drive far and fast. But then you have decentralized Intel support closer to the business and closer to the customer, closer to the user to give that kind of on the ground rapid response. So really interesting podcast. Not news as such, but really interesting. Well worth listeners checking that out as well.
I thought he was brilliant. Yeah, I think he could definitely become one of my most favourite listened to podcasts. Just the way that he talked about what they're doing with intelligence it was really simple. It was just about, you've got to provide context to your strategy in order to be able to navigate where you go. And you just think, it sounds so obvious, but it was also, I think, unusual for intelligence to sit as part of strategy, right? And so that in its own right was quite interesting. And then he talked about the reasons behind that and was saying that the best intelligence in the world, if it isn't aligned to a planning routine, then it's going to go nowhere. So you've got to make sure that it's aligned and integrated into all of your planning processes and routines. So everything from workforce planning to human resources to location and competitive strategy. It was really good. If you haven't listened to it, I think it's definitely one to do so.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot that he said that really resonated with me. Certainly about making sure that the communication side of things that made that intelligence real for the audience, and also about being consistent with the products that you have, so that people aren't spending all of their mind share on trying to figure out what it is they're looking at. They can actually see exactly what they need to do, what decisions they need to make straight away.
Yeah, and he talked about, haven't they just hired a head of corporate comms, or they've got someone who's been in a head of corporate comms role who's coming in to focus on how they are communicating what they're doing internally?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, just really, really clever man. Who he was just really good at putting stuff into plain English without it sounding like some really big thing, and just go, okay, I get it. That's what they do, and that's how they make it so simple, and that's how it becomes a process and not this kind of thing that sits in strategy and becomes invisible. It was really cool. Great shout and find that one, Tobes.
So, as a relative layman here, why wouldn't strategy and intelligence work together normally, Alison? Or why don't they? Sorry, more specifically.
I just think that there's still, when it comes to intelligence, it's still really siloed.
Okay.
So you get lots of data and insight around customers and clients, or around potential consumers, or around markets, or around M&A, or around talent and talent intelligence. And without sounding like the boring person, you unless you join the dots and bring it all together, it gets lost, right? And I think what he was showing was that actually having it all under his team meant that they were joining the dots, and it wasn't sitting in silos within the organisation.
Okay, so it's not like intelligence itself is siloed; it's the individual elements of different types of intelligence are all siloed from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the impression I got.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But I think just on the element that also came through, and it kind of mentioned there, is that because the different natures of the different Intel functions, I think you have a different type of reporting mechanism. So TI generally is more project-based, whereas, say, BI or even HR analytics, people analytics, or MI type stuff is generally more programmatic, where you have the same things you report out week after week, month after month. But
it's repeatable. Yeah,
exactly. You're having the same KPIs and metrics you're scanning against. But I think that is coming into our world more and more. And I think we're seeing more and more repeatable data sets that we're being asked for month after month. And I think that will come into play even more with the SEC as they're starting to tighten up and actually drive kind of what they're wanting to see from their filings, etc. Suddenly you're going to have a real standardization in HR analytics and people data that I think really does lend itself into this more programmatic TI space.
Yeah, completely agree. We'll be able to. Yeah, it's about productizing the data sets, isn't it? And put it into different boxes or user cases, and then being able to flip them out, which I'm sure Kim will be able to talk about when we ask. In fact, Kim, there you are. There's a warning of a question that's going to come.
It was interesting what they brought out on that podcast about the importance of tailoring the product, because that is what makes the talent intelligence digestible and usable. And if it's not tailored, that's a warning area for us not to fall into that trap. Just things that look good to us, that they are understandable and tailored to the need of the recipient.
Excellent. What else is happening, Toby?
So an interesting report about Ireland and looking to grow its cybersecurity workforce to 17,000 people by 2030. It was by Professor Donna O'Shea, a lead of cyber skills. Interesting report. Really looked into kind of a niche area, obviously cybersecurity. Probably not as hot a market as you'd expect it to be, given the troubles we're facing in the world and the amount of social engineering and hacking and stuff going on at the moment. But yeah, look like Ireland is looking to really ramp up its cyber skills, which is very interesting. She highlighted there's just shy of 500 cybersecurity companies in Ireland already. They hire about 7,500 people, so it's a chunky market over there already. But yeah, so it was a really big growth opportunity. Single biggest factor restricting it is it's dependent on the supply of qualified individuals, and I think we see that. Obviously we're biased in this space, but we see that time and time again. Growth is potential, but you really can't do that unless you've got the people in place to deliver on that.
This for me is one of those ones, and this is not picking on Ireland. This is a more generic conversation where a good example. So I was at the HM Treasury a few weeks ago talking about skills and access to skills being a barrier to scaling organisations. So it's exactly the same for tech scaling, or it is rather scaling as it would be for cyber. And how we've got to get to the point as countries where we are tying ambitions in our economic growth to education. Because I sat and looked and I went, right, okay, so 17,000 people, increasing the workforce by 17,000 people in 7 years. Let's make a big assumption that these are through the cyber skills courses, that these are 2-year courses that people can do out of work hours, which they are because they're all online. That's 3,500 students if they start hiring them now that need to come out a year in order to achieve the 17,000 by 2030. And you just go, yeah, is that happening? And so then I went onto the cyber skills website and I looked at the timetable, and the first thing that came up was January 2022. And you think, well, we're already in May. And I think, so there's this kind of I don't want to go on my soapbox on this, but there's this continual challenge between what we hear as drivers for economic growth and action in actually then helping to build out the supply of talent into the market, or the new supply of talent into the market. And I think it's incredibly frustrating as a business leader, particularly if you're running a cyber business in Ireland, to go, well, where are they going to come from?
Yeah, and Alison, I did the same as you and started to dig into the kind of the figures behind it, because we've seen this before, particularly in Ireland with software developers, where there is quite a lot of noise about the availability of that talent, but the reality shows that it's a much more challenging ask than it first appears, and definitely the market's dominated by the big tech companies. Toby, definitely you have a vested interest in that one, but it's interesting to see where a lot of that new demand is starting to come from, because it's incredibly dispersed. The demand's not just coming from the tech companies; it's coming from the big fours, the investment banks, retailers, TikTok. I think was one that came up. Insurance companies. So it's massively diverse, but they're all looking for experienced talent. And 50% of that current workforce has only been in their year for less than 2 years. Or their role, for less than 2 years. So it's interesting to see how that will come to fruition. I see lots of challenges ahead with that.
Yeah.
What next, Toby?
Do you know what? I've got a few things I wanted to touch on, but I'm conscious of time as well. We probably won't have time to dive into all of them. So I'm going to kind of skirt over the big topic that everyone's seeing at the moment, because it's just in the news so much. There's no real point me diving into it. But obviously, a lot of tech companies making layoffs, as we kind of predicted they would. Last pod, we said, a lot of the rapid hyper growths, they're going to get a bit of a squeeze from the VC funding, particularly if they're pre-IPO and late stage funding. We're seeing that kind of kick through, where a lot of companies are saying, well, actually, look, market's cooling a little bit. We probably got a bit overexcited here. Let's just put the brakes on a little bit. So there's been quite a few going around. So you've had some of the big players, so Meta, Twitter, Uber, but there's been many of the smaller players as well that start kicking through and are just putting the brakes on a little bit just to see the lay of the land and how things roll through, really. So that's been a big thing, but that's going to keep going. I can't see that changing or slowing down in the next few quarters. But one thing that I really want to highlight, which is quite interesting, is Eightfold have been selected as a new platform for the Defense Innovation Unit over in the US to build out a new gig application. So that the whole premise of it is to build out a tool, a talent intelligence platform, to identify talent that's currently working for the department that's undiscoverable at the moment. Which I thought it's quite interesting that it's using the whole talent marketplace type piece, and the app's going to be titled Gig Eagle, which sounds a bit too much like Giggle for me, but there we go.
I'm thinking of Family Guy. I don't know whether you watch it. The guy in that who keeps saying giggity, giggity, giggity.
You know what? I thought it was an awesome name until you two both said that.
Yeah, I literally thought it was awesome until that second where I was trying to say it and Giggle came out instead. So, but I like it. I like the fact that it's they're clearly looking for talent. They're looking across the internal side of things, which has been a challenge for most of us. I think any big organization trying to find out who's actually in your company, where is that talent, what skills they have. It's a really big issue. So I'm excited to see the Defense Innovation Unit looking towards this.
Yeah, I think it's a cool one, this, and it's a perfect example of where talent intelligence on internal data can be really interesting, and a great example of looking for skills and not looking for job titles, and in order to try and identify where you could find workers who've got the skills. And it's focused on short-term projects. There was a business, and in fact, they're having to partner with Carasoft, which is an IT services provider who I suspect are probably the kind of on the government tick list of people that they can go with or go through. But there was another business here, which I think was called ProFinder, who were trying to do a similar thing, and in fact, have done a similar thing. But they started out by being in a position to help the Big Four understand who could resource a project. So when a project came in, instead of saying, okay, who have we got that's next to us and available and can do this, that you were looking across the whole workforce and saying who's got the skills to do this and who's got availability. So I think it's a really neat use of talent intelligence on internal data to make some decisions. I think it's great.
Yeah,
well, we've also questioned the use of talent intelligence when it comes to Eightfold. Is it talent intelligence or is it talent discovery?
Oh, I've given up fighting over it now. I've just got to the point where I just can't. Yeah, I just sound like a broken record if I start about it. But I think it's the reality is it is intelligence on talent, right? It's looking at an internal workforce, not an external workforce. So
I'll put my stick away. That was easy to stir the pot there. Then
I
sorry.
know, and it's a Friday, and I'm not going to stir on.
You're not biting.
Kim, help me out.
Yeah, I agree. I'll not get started in that one either because I'll be here for too long. But it definitely, this one is an interesting one. It's it's like supercharged internal mobility, isn't it? So it's interesting to see how far that'll go, and also what it could potentially come from it. I think it's definitely one to watch.
And actually, if I've read it correctly, it's not just it's not just employees. It includes people who've done kind of kind of a national service or reservist, isn't it? So not necessarily. Yeah, thank you. That was what I was looking for. So it's people who presumably have been through the tick box exercises that they need to do in order to be part of that community, and then looking at their skills. So it is more than just the people in inverted commas that work for the DoD. It's sort of looking in their entire ecosystem. It's very clever.
Yeah,
I think that's for me how I see companies moving in the future. If I think about big enterprise orgs in particular, we often talk about the fact that the gig economy is the way forward, etc. And I think that's probably stalled a little compared to what people thought it would do. But I think people do want variety. They do want that flexibility. But I think the future is being employed by companies as an individual. So they're hiring you, Alan, for your skills, not Alan into a given role. And then you have the kind of internal talent marketplace where people can move between gigs and look at different short-term projects. And that can then feed into the whole talent and performance management piece where you get rated on each gig and each project. So it's kind of a cyclical, always alive thing rather than a once-a-year performance review. So I think that is the way that things will go eventually. But we need more of these talent marketplace type platforms that can cut across all the different types of workforce, whether it's internal, whether it's flex workers, whether it's outsourcing, whatever. We need to have that visibility to make it work.
Yeah, and I think the potential for it is huge. I was only speaking to Adam Hawkins from LinkedIn during the week, and we were having the discussion about how the pandemic has accelerated this to some degree because individuals have discovered skills and interests that they didn't have time to invest in before, but are now very invested in them and wanting to keep them on as side hustles or projects, or perhaps invest time in making them a career for the future. So the addition of those skills that weren't there before, if we could capture that, would be phenomenal.
Yeah,
I think that side hustle piece is probably going to come to the fore even more. I know to your point, I think it's absolutely been accelerated due to COVID, but I think with the inflation going up, where the economy tightening a little bit, I think more and more people are going to have to do side hustles to try and get more money and to survive. Yeah. So I think we're going to see more and more people starting to branch out and do things off the side of the desk. I don't think all of Europe's necessarily geared up for it in the same way. I think that the US is much more comfortable in that space, and you get to see far more people with that side gig and side projects. But I think we're going to see a rapid evolution where people are going to start doing more and more stuff off the side of a desk just to make life ends meet, to be honest. But I think that will prompt a change and a review of how people see their career.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to make sure there's no stigmatism around the side hustle, because often it can be interpreted as people making engraved chopping boards to sell at the local farmers market or something like that. When actually it could be super professional work, can't it? It's just utilising your skills in other markets and other environments for other organisations.
You're suggesting you don't want my chopping boards, Alan?
I don't want your chopping boards, Toby. I've told you enough times. No.
I've already got 3. Olive wood.
What about you made a beautiful ring?
I've made many rings. Alan didn't even know this side of my life. Made many rings, wooden spoons.
I like wood. I have a big workshop and a table saw and the whole kit. We should do a carpentry podcast.
Oh my goodness!
Sounds like we've got a side gig coming up here.
Side hustle.
I'm not sure that those skills would appear in any AI platform driven by talent intelligence about either of you.
Anyway, back to TI, away from carpentry. Any more news, Toby?
Last bit of news for me for the day is SHL. So SHL is obviously massive global leader in the whole kind of assessment space, talent acquisition, talent management, tech, that sort of stuff. They've launched a new innovation hub called SHL Labs. Chunky investment, $30 million investment. They're having a real mixed capabilities and mixed skill set across us: data scientists, psychs, artificial intelligence, etc., design individuals, really to push talent tech and to drive it forward. They're going to invest $30 million over the next 3 years, and then going to have hubs in US, Europe, India, and China. It's going to be a fairly chunky team, 50 plus researchers looking into all the different domains around psych, science, artificial intelligence, D&I. And I like the fact they highlighted the metaverse, which I think it's probably the first TATM talent tech platform I've seen that's making reference to the metaverse at scale. So, yeah, interesting.
It is really interesting because SHL are obviously one of the longest players in this world, and they've been in and around the talent acquisition and talent technology space for donkey's years now. But it did feel like they maybe lost their way a wee bit a few years back, and they were kind of concentrating on their core product that people frankly were looking at alternative options. So it's good to see that putting some real investment into innovation, what that can mean, because they're still a massive organization and still fairly extensively used across the world, but it is time for change there. So seeing them put some real money behind this is good.
Yeah, that was definitely the piece that stood out for me when I read it, was about the metaverse. I mean, if they are going to be an early adopter in that space, they stand to really make some massive inroads, given their experience in the past.
Absolutely.
I thought it was quite interesting. Well, no, I thought it was really interesting. Partly because it's a transformation in their own business, and it's a focus on how important tech is to the world of talent. I guess there were two things that leapt out of it for me. One is, how are they going to engage with scaling businesses in this space already? Yeah, rather than, because that's how they're going to accelerate the use of talent tech rather than starting from scratch. And then my second point is, I don't think 30 million over 3 years is a lot of money. If I'm really honest, I think it sounds like a huge amount, but actually, if you look at all of the individual talent tech businesses and how much they're spending and investing, unless they put a real focus on where they're going to put that money, I think it runs the risk of becoming a lab that doesn't focus on things that are then going to lead to outputs.
Particularly if you're rolling in headcount costs into that, which I presume
that's what I did. I just went, oh, I wonder what 30 million divided by 50 is. Yeah. And then went over 3 years. And I went, okay, so that's 200,000 average salary over that 3 year period. I went, well, that's not actually that much money. That's how I went to, doesn't sound like it. Just no wonder. You can tell you're talking to someone in a tech scale up. You suddenly start to think that 30 million isn't a lot of money.
Just burn through it. It's monopoly money, isn't it? Just churn it through.
Doesn't sound like that much, actually. Maybe we need to double it.
It would be interesting to see exactly which or what locations they were going to house the lab in the US and Europe, particularly, because
absolutely. And that's where India and China came in, isn't it? It's like actually they'll be accessing potentially cheaper sources of talent. They need a location assessment.
They need some TI.
They need some TI to tell them where to grow. There you go.
Anyway, listen, guys, I think it's time to chat with Kim. We've heard some of her views on the wider world, so let's hear some more specific things about her world at AMS. So, Alison, it's time for you to step up to the plate.
Well, it's not me, it's Kim, really.
Well, yeah, you to fire the questions and then Kim to step up to the plate and answer them then. However we want to define it.
Bless you. Kim, thanks ever so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I know that we're taking you out of your comfort zone a bit, but actually you're doing great. So thank you. You talked earlier about the team is now, I think, 85. And you joined in, 2017. Can you talk about how the team has changed both size and I guess shape over the last 5 years?
Absolutely. So whenever we started, it was very much more of a concept more than anything else. We were doing it a little bit. And if I'm honest, and for those listening that don't know what AMS is, because I appreciate it might not be so much of a household name, but we consider ourselves to be a total workforce solutions firm, specialize in, more well known for RPO and those type of solutions, contingent workforce solutions. But there's a much broader spectrum of what we do in terms of helping our clients have a total talent strategy. But the insights and intelligence side of things came about. We were working with one particular client, and we were looking to see how we could evolve the service that we were going to be providing for them. And we were looking at what some of our really experienced sourcers were already doing and recruiters were already doing. And all of them, without exception, were doing some research as part of their day-to-day work. They were making the effort to understand, well, what's the market telling me before I put any effort into trying to find these candidates. So we decided, and two of our smartest minds in an AMS, not me at this stage, that sat down to say, well, could we do this? Could we put something together? And they did. They put together someone for this particular client. And then they also thought, well, if we're doing this for a client, shouldn't we really be doing it for ourselves too? So they put together a small team. So we had a handful of people back then that were doing insights. And I was one of those original people that were put together for the central team, as we called it, within AMS. And at that point, we very much had to proactively go out to the business to say, well, how could we help with these projects? So that involved a lot of data crunching for us to look at, well, where could we do projects, or what could be of most value. That was, for me, probably one of the most exciting parts of the beginning of the journey. It sounds very cliched, but it really was, because we actually got to really lift the lid on some of the ways that we worked, and the numbers that sat behind that, and really just delight people with some of the projects that we then delivered, to solve some problems that had been around for quite some time. So fast forward a little bit, that word spread very quickly. We have a saying in the team that you're often as good as your last project, and that's very true, because people see whenever you've added value, you've made a difference, they want some of that too. So that created a scenario where all of our clients wanted them to get in on that, and wanted us to provide that as quickly as possible as we could for them. And in terms of what we delivered, that has evolved as well, because we started off doing quite transactional pieces of research for them. But the more they saw the value and the benefit that it was bringing, the more then it was, could we do a much more strategic piece? Could you help us out with this challenge or this problem statement? So we have reached a point now where we had grown up to 40 as of last year, the beginning of last year, and then we've more than doubled that over the course of the last 12 months. Again, just because of the sheer appetite for insights and research. And actually, when I was listening to Toby, that podcast that you shared with Robert, whenever he talked about brutal prioritization, that's definitely something that we've had to employ in terms of making sure that we are able to meet all of the needs and all of the requests that come up. But it's been amazing to be part of that journey, and I'm so privileged. Again, I know it's a cliche thing to say, but really I'm privileged to be leading a team of some amazing people, because it's such a diverse group of individuals that we've got to put together. I was only just speaking to our board a couple of weeks ago about it, and I took a little bit of a different tack to most people in describing their function. Didn't so much talk about the numbers, because I think our numbers spoke for themselves in terms of what we produce. But when I actually broke down how diverse the people are within our function, it really was staggering. I mean, I won't go through it now because I could be here all day, but we had doctors, an attorney, and a marine biologist, chess champion, golfers, military intelligence. We discovered music was a big theme. I'd actually love it, maybe to even discuss with you whether that's something that appears in the rest of your teams, because we had sopranos, composers, guitarists, pianists, and so on. So it's just such a varied group of individuals, but the diversity of thought that they bring to the work that they do for us is just, you couldn't replicate that, and you can't train for that. That's only something that they bring inherently to their role.
That's really, and I definitely want to come back to that, because I think that's really interesting. Like us, you've talked about, and in fact we were talking about it earlier in the week, you've seen the appetite and the demand for your services snowball in the last year. Can you give our listeners a sense of the volume of work that you're delivering?
So, I mean, it runs into the thousands in terms of the projects that we're delivering for each of our clients. And that can be from something that's fairly straightforward and ask that we turn around in a matter of hours, or it can be something much more complex that might take 6 weeks or longer if it's a real meaty piece that we're working on. So a real variety of projects and research and a variety of complexity as well, but it definitely ranges into the thousands and is growing. So obviously there's some efficiencies that we've put in to deal with that, because growth isn't just that about a linear growth of simply recruiting more and more people. We try to grow in a way that means that we're much more efficient too, and we're using technology to help us do that. But the appetite is still definitely there. So it's thinking about ways that we can do that and meet that appetite without falling over. Because I think if we're all honest with ourselves, if we took on every piece of work that we've been asked to do, certainly within the last 6 months, it would definitely put my people in not a great place. So we have to look at that very carefully and make sure we're keeping that balance, allowing our our stakeholders to be able to self-serve in many ways and leave the more complex, more granular analysis to us.
I was talking to a head of talent acquisition at a global IT services business earlier this week, and he used exactly that terminology. He said that they are growing from being a team that was quite tactical to a team that's much more strategic. And actually what they want to do now is they want to create self-serve on the kind of BAU projects, so that they're not turning it down because it's important, right? And it's tactical, but that they're focusing their efforts where their experiences are best used to it. Can you give us a flavour of some of the more tactical projects that the team either was or still is delivering that could then potentially become self-serve? So what's the sort of tactical stuff that your clients are asking for? And then, what are the more strategic examples?
So certainly the tactical stuff would kind of call our bread and butter in terms of the things that we deliver as a talent acquisition organization, because a lot of the work that we do would be related to specific requisitions, for example. So an organization would see a need, they would raise a rec to fill that need. And often as an organization, we would be doing that for them. And so that would be kind of the tactical pieces of requests of insights that we would get to say, well, actually,
sorry, Kim. So you'd then be giving them data on like the labour pool when they raise a rec. Is that? Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So we would say, well, what's the supply of the talent? What's the availability of that talent? Who else is competing for that talent? How much does that talent cost? So those kind of very basic indicators, if you like, that we can get from the market to give them enough information to be able to work that requisition, to be able to fill that job and source those candidates in an effective way. Because if we can give them the data that allows them to do that in half the time, because they're only reaching out to those candidates that they know are going to respond or they're the most appropriate fit, then that makes them much more capable in being able to respond to that client's need. So that would definitely be the tactical pieces that we would do. And in terms of the more strategic pieces, well, that can be anything and everything. But, D&I often comes into a lot of the strategic pieces. So understanding, for example, maybe the gender diversity in a certain skill set or a certain location. If an organization wants to move in there and they want to try and make some inroads into their own diversity metrics, is that even possible with that particular skill set? Or again, location analysis to understand, well, if we're going to move to a different location or we're going to expand into a different region that we've never been to before, again, is that possible before we spend all of that money to purchase an office and move all of the work there? So kind of very two different ends of the spectrum, both really important, but one cannot really happen without the other.
How have you seen the end user client contacts change in line with that, or haven't you? Are you still delivering to the same client contacts and then they're delivering internally, or as an organisation are AMS now engaging with different stakeholders in the clients?
Yeah, it would be very different stakeholders. So obviously for the more strategic pieces, it can be anything from the heads of TA or HR right up to the CFOs or CEOs, depending on the size of the organization. And sometimes the asks will come directly from that audience, and our insiders would be delivering those projects and that research to that audience. And then for the more tactical pieces, it may be the hiring managers themselves, because they're the ones recruiting for those roles. So that makes the most sense to deliver that piece of insight to them. But I think the most important thing that we always have to bear in mind is that we have to be really mindful of who our audience will be whenever we're thinking about putting together that piece of insight, because that will inform how big that piece of insight is, the terminology that we use, just the whole setup. Particularly if it's going at a C-suite level, they don't want a 20-page report. They want 1 or 2 pages to tell them exactly what they need to know.
Do you think that you're on those projects? I think that's really interesting. When we're delivering work to clients, that particularly at that level, it's the so what.
Yeah,
right? It's not. The insight is interesting, right? But actually, I want you to tell me what I want to do, what I've got to do.
Exactly.
Do you think you're therefore starting to merge into a space where the big consultancies play, which is much more around kind of workforce strategy? And because of the questions that you're being asked, right? You're being taken there by your clients rather than trying to take them on. Because of that, so what?
Definitely. And the so what, and I know that if any of my team are listening to this later, they will be smiling to themselves, because I think I say the so what at least once a day, because for me, that should be there, whether it's a small tactical piece or whether it's a huge strategic piece. If you don't have the so what, then it's just data. And ultimately, they won't use it if they don't know what they need to do with it. But I would definitely have seen a shift where they want more. They want more of the so what. And I think it's really important for us, again, to maintain that balance, because oftentimes they want that so what to turn into, well, this is definitely what we should do, or definitely is going to happen. Yeah. And so there's a lot of that consultative approach that has to happen to say, well, we're not a crystal ball. We cannot predict for you exactly the future or exactly what you should do as an organization. You still have that responsibility. It sits firmly with you, but we can very much tell you this is the way the market is, and this is what our recommendations would be based on how much we know about you and what we're seeing. So it's about striking that balance. But yeah, we're definitely seeing much more of a move towards that.
And that's what we hear, right? Yeah. So Stratagens is a fantastic piece of software. Thanks very much. Overlay that with the so what. Give us the answers. And I don't know whether some of that is just because actually it's easier as an external to be saying this is a recommendation or this is what you should do. Because as an internal team, I think it's quite hard to do that. Toby, you can come in and comment on that. But I think as an external, you could look at it and you don't have some of the context, and you go, well, this is what you want to do. This is what you should be doing, and this is why. And I think it's much easier when you're looking from the outside in.
I'd almost go the other way, if I'm going to be honest. Quite often I've seen in the past with external consulting firms, not specifically TI consulting firms, but the broader consulting firms, they're almost scared to make a recommendation because they'll kind of give the options, but they won't put their hat on which option they'd do or what their recommendation is, because they don't know necessarily the full internal context. I think there is a difficulty internally if you're completely decentralized and if you're in the line of business, because you can get that pressure to deliver what's needed for your boss or your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss. And suddenly you're having pressure to, well, actually, we need the data to stack up to make this decision right. So you kind of get your hand forced a little bit, which is one of the reasons I've always been a big advocate of centralizing TI teams. Even if you ring fence a headcount, you need it centralized just to get the power base away from the decision maker. You need it somewhere that can be almost third party but internal. So yeah, I think if we don't make a recommendation, if we don't push that, I think we lose a lot of the value of being in the company. So yeah, I'd always push the teams to.
Yeah, and forgive me, I wasn't suggesting that internal teams don't give recommendations. I was saying I think it's easier as an external to be able to do it in some ways. So I think I can think of business leaders that we've sat in front of, and we've been able to say, I can't make the data tell you what you want it to tell you. So you've either got to make the decision based on your gut, or you've got to trust my data, right? But I can't make it do what you want it to do. Kim, do you get that at all? Do you think?
Definitely, absolutely, we do. And I would say one of the biggest challenges is probably more related to, and yes, exactly what Toby said about that there will be pressures around data telling a certain story in a certain way. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have is just the lack of an ability to be able, from an audience, to be able to be literate with the data, to understand what it means for themselves if they don't have the so what. So I think that's a huge challenge, that lack of data literacy that sits within kind of the wider stakeholder audience, so they can properly understand and infer from that themselves. Because yes, the recommendations are all very well and good, but actually if you don't have someone on the ground or someone who's really close to it then our recommendations will always be slightly removed. So I think it's twofold. Our recommendations are really powerful, but we need the individuals that are close to that department or function or whatever it may be to be literate with data enough to be able to take those recommendations and tailor them themselves. And I think that's still a challenge that we see and will continue to see unless we kind of address that lack of data literacy.
Toby?
Yeah, just wanted to kind of ask a question to Kim and I guess everyone as well. One of the things I've definitely seen around that impacting the senior leaders and being able to consult, etc., is in the same way with exec search. In actual fact, I think it mirrors across. When somebody's paying for an external service, they give it a level of essentially respect and credibility because they're paying for it and they see them as the truly expert services. Whereas I think there definitely is an element with internal where you have to build that credibility and it takes a lot longer. That they'll look at your data and almost take it with a pinch of salt, whereas the external data they'll nail to the mast and say, yeah, that's what it is because it's come from these external professionals. And it's almost seen in a different light. I think it's changing, but I think it takes a lot longer.
We've talked about this before and about internal TI teams being cost recovery units in many ways, isn't it? It's how do you benchmark yourself against what is the money that would have been spent on externals, and use that almost as an ROI for an internal team. Is the mechanism for doing that actually charging internally? Because as you say, there's money being spent. People therefore think about the results in a different way. I'm not suggesting that's necessarily what you could do, but I just think it's quite an interesting concept for anyone growing a team internally that says, would you pay for this? How much would you pay for it? Right, now let's use this as a source of cost recovery.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to go about it. One of the ways you can do it is certainly taking the cost avoidance route, I think, to say rather than charging internally, actually, here's what you would have paid. And that's the value that we've added. But I think it's one of the most recurring challenging areas of TI in terms of demonstrating that value.
Yeah, completely agree. Can you... I want to touch on the hiring piece that you went to earlier, because we can't ignore that. And you just talked about this really diverse team who all appear to have as a thread running through it intelligence, IQ and EQ, and creativity. Is that fair enough, or am I just kind of making some assumptions?
No, that would absolutely be kind of one of the common themes. And I think whenever we recruited, and it's something that whenever I started the function and brought that together, and Toby, you've maybe experienced this as well, that actually, particularly in the UK and the European market, talent intelligence and insights didn't really exist as a function. So if you went out and advertised with that job title, there wasn't really any existing talent in any significant form to tap into in that way. So we started out with the idea of actually we're not going to look necessarily for specific experience or expertise, but we distilled it down into what are the core things that we look for in individuals, what makes an individual successful whenever they join our team. And so it was very much around that ability to learn information. It sounds a daft thing to say, but one of the things we look for is humility. And I mean it in the terms of the ability to know that no matter how much you learn or how much you know about a subject, there's always more out there, or there's always a little bit more accurate information that you could get. So if you have individuals that are constantly willing to learn more and take in more information, but also have the ability to give themselves some creative space to be able to think about new ways to present that back, then it's a really powerful combination.
We talk about people being nosy. We want to always hire people who are nosy for that reason. And then this kind of underlying culture that sits certainly in the Strashton's team, which is every day is a school day, right? Yeah, every day there is something new that we can learn, and you can learn that from anyone and anywhere. And it's the magic of turning that into insight and then answering the so what is what you want to hire people from. Toby, have you got a bunch of musicians in your team? I want to follow up on that piece from Kim.
I don't know, is the honest answer. My boss's boss was a musician. He started in Amazon Music, and he was very strong on the music side. And that kind of technical creativity, I think it definitely does run through. So I think musicians will probably be a very good stream of individuals to target, to be honest.
Very cool. We're going to have to put a doodle up on the WhatsApp group or somewhere. It just says, or maybe on the Facebook group. How many of you are musicians? How many of you can write music? How many of you can play music? Let's just see if there's an underlying theme. I think it's very cool.
I definitely are. I'm not.
There's similarities there. You take notes and you make you compose into a song. You put them together to make something quite meaningful. And I think there's a lot of similarities between that and what we do with Insights.
Absolutely. And Toby, whilst you said I'm not, without wanting to go back to carpentry, that's creative. That's taking something and it's turning it into something else. So there's something quite interesting in there. Can I touch, Kim, on, we talked about making sure that every project is unique to the individual, and it has to be. But likewise, when you are a supplier into your client base, albeit a very integrated supplier, when you're a supplier into your client base, you almost need to productize what you can do, rather than say we can do anything. How do you package up or productize the pieces that you can do when you're explaining it to a client?
It's a really good question, and that's something I think it took us a good couple of years to get to, and it was quite organic how we came to that point where we took all of the pieces of work that the team at that point, which was a much smaller team, I think it's about just under 20. At that point, we decided to kind of formalize what we do, and we branded what we produced to create a very consistent look and feel, so that if anyone outside of our function was looking at it, could immediately identify it as coming from us, whether that would be a 1-pager or a 20, 30-pager, it was still identifiable as coming from the Insights COE, or Centre of Excellence, as we call ourselves. So that was really important, and that was critical to our success in being able to grow so rapidly. Because once we had that, then it meant people could still bring their individual ways of visualizing or narrating the work that they did, but it still had a consistent look and feel. So it also means that there's times I can look at pieces of work, and when I read them, I'll know exactly who has produced it.
Yes.
But anyone outside of our COE won't necessarily know that, but they will see it as being an identifiable product from us.
Really interesting. We are asked continually about robust salary and comp data, and I suspect your team is as well. Do you have a magic wand or a magic answer on that, or is it we do what we can to find what the comp data in the marketplace is now?
I think the short answer to that is no. We don't have a magic wand, and I think if anyone really says that they do, I would seriously doubt what they were saying. And I think it's such a difficult data point to get accurately, and always was. But I think was exacerbated by the pandemic, and then what's happened since then, where you have salaries rising at a rate that I've certainly not seen before, and certainly not seen while I've been involved with TI. So it's really difficult to get accurate, consistent, and reliable information that is also up to date. Because the vast majority of research that's out there is, if you take salary surveys for this year, they will be based on potentially last year or the year before's data. And it's just not relevant to what's happening in the market right now. So, we have to use a mix of different tools, a mix of, what's happening out there on the market, and really just pull that all together and aggregate it the best way we can. We're always on the lookout, and there's a few different tools that we use, but I think it's the one area of TI where we probably have some ways to go.
I'm so pleased you said that, because it's just I get asked it all the time, and actually kind of echo your response. If you really want robust data, the only way it's going to be robust is if it's historical, and if it's historical in today's market, it's out of date. So you kind of end up in this loop. And I go, anyone that's offering you salary insights across the globe for all roles, my God, I'd love to get to know them, because I just think it's amazing. Toby, have you got a magic tool in your toolbox?
No, exactly the same. We specifically say we don't cover comp at all. Obviously we do, but we officially don't, because of exactly what you said. It just gets so complex, and comp events obviously always get the noses put out of joint a little bit because they're using different data sets and they don't trust external data sets. But I think the way I position it is, even if this isn't what external companies are paying, this is what our candidates are seeing and expecting.
Yes.
So no matter what we think, no matter whether it's valid or not, that's what our candidates are going to expect. So if we come in low, that it's still going to not land in the market.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of phrasing it, isn't it? Which is, it's demand data that, whether we like it or not, that's what other people are talking about. And therefore, as a talent attractor, we've got to be thinking about it and looking at it through that lens. Cool. Last question from me, if I may, Kim, because it's been great actually hearing a supplier of talent intelligence into some really awesome clients, and it's lovely listening to the way that you describe your team. So I guess all of that leads to what's next for the talent intelligence or intelligence in AMS. Great
question. So I think for us, it's well, there's lots of different, I was going to say it's twofold, but there's lots of different folds to it. But certainly for me, the people side is definitely what's next in terms of how we develop and grow as a function and do that, but bring our people along that journey with us. We've been involved with a number of different schemes so far this year that have been really successful, and we're hoping to continue that. So one was in partnership with the National Autistic Society, where we've brought some neurodiverse individuals into the team, and that has worked fantastically well, and we got some great feedback from them on that. But also and Recruit for Spices is another one that we've been working with as well to bring some individuals into the team, again bringing so much more diverse talent and a really unique perspective to the work that we do, so that people aspect will continue to be first and foremost for us. And I think also in terms of the products that we produce and keeping up and constantly evolving what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think, we've been really successful in what we've done so far, but we don't want to rest our laurels on that. So we're looking at, different ways we can connect with other parts of the business that produce data to see, can we streamline what we do? Can we work together? Can we be more efficient in that? And then finally, in terms of, the future around how can we be much more predictive, and what other data can we harness to look at that and to become much more embedded in both our own organization, but also our client organizations as well. So it's all tied up in all of those different things. But I think the one constant will be change, definitely. So that's probably what's next for us, is change, but change in a good way.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights today. It's been really, really lovely.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been incredible. I just sat back and listened then, Kim, because what you were bringing forward was really, really insightful. But I am now going to have to do my usual party pooper thing and call time. Your host is calling a stop, so we can release Kim back into the real world outside of podcast land. Kim, it's been great having you on the podcast. How was it for you?
It was great, thank you. It went so quickly.
Brilliant, excellent. And so we're going to close this off. So to our listeners, as usual, a massive thanks for supporting us. Keep telling your friends about us, please do. We're getting increasingly popular, but this is still a relatively niche podcast. We'd love you to tell the world about the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. And as ever, Alison and Toby, thanks for co-hosting and actually doing most of the work. It's always appreciated.
No, thank you.
We couldn't do it without you, Alan, as proved last month when you said I can't do it. We went, ugh, we can't do it without you. So
Not doing that then.
Oh, fair enough. So I'm going to do my usual my cheesy sign-off. Stay intelligent, folks. Bye!
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I wanted for the last time to remind you about our generous sponsor, Stratagens. Here's that posh chap again, telling you about their fabulous product.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.